Rome is dead and North Africa is barbarian. But one Eastern Roman emperor has a dream of renewal. In the early 5th century, amid the dissolution of Roman power in the West, the Vandals, a Germanic people, were on the move. In 429, their new king, Gaiseric, led a Vandal Allen group, allegedly around 80,000 in number, across the Strait of Gibraltar into Roman North Africa. Whether invited or acting on their own ambitions, Gaiseric's forces swept east along the African coast. They seized Hippo Regius after a long siege. Augustine, Christian philosopher and bishop of Hippo, died, as the siege still ringed Hippo's walls. By 435, the Western Roman authorities, unable to defeat Gaiseric, signed a treaty granting the Vandals control of coastal Numidia and Mauritania as foederati. This truce was temporary. On October 19, 439, Gaiseric broke the peace and launched a surprise attack on Carthage, the richest city of Roman Africa. It was to be the death blow to Western Roman power in Africa, as Carthage fell to the Vandals. Gaiseric made it the capital of a new Vandal kingdom and commandeered the province's wealth and fertile farmlands, which had been a vital grain supply for Rome. In 442, after a brief inconclusive war with Rome, a new peace reshaped Africa. The Vandals were formally recognized as masters of Eastern Numidia and Africa Proconsularis, no longer as foederati, but as fully independent. With Carthage secured, the Vandals formally established their own kingdom. Gaiseric strengthened his position by building a powerful navy. In 455, after a dispute over a broken marriage alliance, Gaiseric sailed his army to Italy and sacked Rome. This was a far more devastating looting than the Visigothic sack of 410. For 2 weeks, the Vandals scraped the Eternal City of its riches, an act so infamous that vandalism became synonymous with wanton destruction. Soon, Vandal fleets ranged across the Mediterranean, raiding and plundering with impunity. Taking advantage of Roman civil strife, the Vandals conquered the wealthy islands of the Western Mediterranean, like Sardinia, Corsica, Mallorca, and the rest of the Balearics, and sometimes held parts of Sicily. Not long after, a large fleet assembled by Western Emperor Majorian in 460 was intercepted and destroyed, and a massive joint expedition in 468 was decisively defeated by Gaiseric's navy. Gaiseric famously asked the imperial admiral Basiliscus for a brief truce, used the time to arm his fire ships, and then drove them into the dense Roman fleet at anchor. The inferno wrecked hundreds of ships and bankrupted the campaign in a single night. For a generation, the sea was Vandal. Only in the mid-470s did the Eastern Emperor Zeno conclude a perpetual peace with Gaiseric, tacitly recognizing Vandal control of Africa. By the time of Gaiseric's death, soon after in 477, the Vandals had secured a vast North African kingdom, commanding both the grain trade and the seas. Unlike other Germanic successor kingdoms in Europe, the Vandals did not preserve the facade of Roman imperial authority. Gaiseric and his successors minted coins with their own images and ruled as sovereigns. They maintained distinct Vandal customs, language, and dress to set themselves apart as a ruling elite over the largely Romano-African population. Carthage thrived as their capital, and Vandal nobles took over estates and towns, though Latin remained the common tongue. Gaiseric reportedly practiced religious toleration early in his reign, but the Vandals as a group were devout Arian Christians, adhering to a form of Christianity deemed heretical by the Catholic or Universal Church. Over time, Vandal rulers came to fiercely enforce Arianism and suppress Nicene Christianity, which was the faith of the majority in North Africa. The main difference is that Arianism views Jesus the Son as created and therefore of a different essence than God. Catholic churches in Carthage and elsewhere were seized or closed, and under some kings, clergy were exiled, persecuted, or even martyred. Gaiseric's son, Honeric, who took power in 477, initially showed restraint toward Nicene subjects. He most likely feared intervention from Constantinople, but he soon hardened his resolve. From 482 onward, in the face of instability and declining Arianism, Huneric issued edicts against the Nicene Christians, forbidding their worship and exiling bishops. But the instability caused the Vandal domain to contract. By 484, a Berber leader named Mastis in the Ore Mountains broke away entirely, establishing an autonomous kingdom of the Ores beyond Vandal control. Likewise, the distant kingdom of Altava emerged as Berber groups from Mauritania, those the Romans called Moorish, and leftover Roman communities formed their own mini-states on the margins of Vandal territory. These losses signaled the beginning of the Vandal kingdom's decline. After Huneric's death, a period of relative stability and moderation followed. King Gunthermund halted the most brutal persecutions, allowing exiled clergy to return. His successor, Thrasimund, largely ceased the religious oppression, more so concerned with diplomatic balance. He married a sister of Theodoric the Great, king of the Ostrogoths in Italy, forging an alliance with the Gothic kingdom. Relations with the Eastern Roman Empire were peaceful. Emperor Anastasius I cultivated friendship with the Vandals. In 523, a dramatic shift in Vandal policy came with the accession of Hilderic, the grandson of Gaiseric. Hilderic was uniquely connected to the old Roman world. His mother was Eudocia, daughter of the Western Emperor Valentinian III, whom Gaiseric had taken captive in Rome decades earlier. Perhaps influenced by his Roman lineage, Hilderic was an amiable king who cultivated close ties with Constantinople. He ended the persecution of Nicene Christians and allowed Catholic bishops to fill vacant positions. But the Vandal elite despised his pro-Roman attitude. A Vandal defeat to Berber rebels was the last straw. Sensing weakness, Hilderic's cousin Gelimer led a coup in 530, imprisoning Hilderic and usurping the throne. Gelimer reinstituted Arianism as the state religion and tried to rally Vandal pride, but his coup had dire consequences. Hilderic's amicable attitude towards Constantinople came to bear fruit. He had made a friend and ally to Emperor Justinian, giving the Eastern Empire a pretext to intervene. Justinian demanded Hilderic's restoration, but Gelimer defiantly refused, and even executed Hilderic in 532. Justinian declared war. By this time, the Eastern Empire had just secured peace on its Persian frontier, freeing its forces for Western campaigns. Justinian, dreaming of reclaiming Rome's lost western provinces, seized the moment to launch an expedition to reconquer North Africa. So began the Vandalic War, North Africa's greatest test in centuries. In the summer of 533, Justinian sent his best general, Belisarius, to Africa. He stood at the head of a relatively small but well-disciplined army. Belisarius had recently proven himself with victories against the Persians, and he was chosen for his military genius. The general was a Latin-speaking Roman from the Balkans and was instructed to present himself as a liberator of Rome's African subjects. In early September, Belisarius's fleet landed at Caput Vada, catching the Vandals completely by surprise. Vandal King Gelimer had underestimated the threat, and at that moment much of his army was absent. Gelimer's brother Zazo and a large Vandal force were away in Sardinia suppressing a rebellion by the Vandal governor there. Advancing northward, Belisarius assured local inhabitants that he came to restore imperial rule and punish the persecutors of Nicene Christians. Strict discipline was enforced on his troops to prevent any looting or abuse of the populace. Outside Carthage, the decisive encounter came at the Battle of Ad-Decimum on September 13th. Gelimer attempted to ambush Belisarius about 10 miles from Carthage in a three-pronged attack. But the plan unraveled. His brother Amatus was killed in a premature assault, and Gelimer, upon seeing the body, lost his nerve at the critical moment. Belisarius regrouped and drove the Vandal army from the field. By nightfall, Carthage fell without a siege. Belisarius entered the capital and famously dined in King Gelimer's palace on the same day it was liberated. Meanwhile, Gelimer fled west to Numidia to join forces with his returning brother Zazo. The Vandals made one last stand in December at the Battle of Tricamarum, but were utterly defeated. Zazo was killed in the fighting, and Gelimer's remaining troops shattered. By March 534, Gelimer surrendered to the Romans, reportedly uttering, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." In less than a year, the Vandal kingdom had been extinguished. Belisarius sent Gelimer and the Vandal treasure back to Constantinople, where Justinian granted the vanquished king estates in Galatia, and paraded Vandal captives in a triumphal procession. Justinian swiftly reincorporated North Africa into the Roman Empire, establishing a new Praetorian prefecture of Africa with its capital at Carthage. The Vandal elite was largely uprooted, and as a people, the Vandals disappeared from history after the war. North Africa, after a century under Vandal rulers, was Roman once more, at least on paper. The Byzantine Reconquest restored control. But peace was short-lived. During Vandal rule, the Berbers had become largely independent. So when Byzantine officials attempted to re-establish taxes, garrisons, and road control, it led to war. For nearly 15 years, Africa was in turmoil, facing mutinies and Berber incursions. It was not until 548 that the talented general John Troglita finally won a decisive victory at the fields of Cato and restored order. By the 570s, the Mauro-Roman Kingdom, a Berber state that largely stayed out of the Mori Wars, dissolved into a series of rump states. In 585, Emperor Maurice reorganized the territory as the Exarchate of Africa, a semi-autonomous province. A supreme official called the Exarch, based in Carthage, wielded combined civil and military authority to better defend the region. The land recovered from the devastation of war. Fields of grain and olives once again made Africa a breadbasket for the empire. The African Church, free from Arian persecution, flourished and resumed its intellectual life. In the 600s, North Africa was so stable that it contributed significantly to imperial affairs. With substantial Berber support, the Exarch Heraclius the Elder led a fleet from Carthage to Constantinople in 610, overthrowing the tyrant Phocas and making his son emperor. But Africa's security was waning. Plague, which first struck in Justinian's time, and the draining wars in Italy and against Persia, had sapped Byzantine resources. Religious disputes with Constantinople, like the Monothelite controversy, meant to be a compromise with the Miaphysites in Egypt, caused conflict between the staunchly Chalcedonian African Church and the imperial government. This internal division would prove fatal when a new external threat appeared. The armies of Islam had arrived,